Hey Tom, good to see you again. And Garland, it's been ages, and good to
It
have you
has been.
back on. Good to have you
Great to
back
talk
on.
to you guys, man. I've,
Yeah,
I've had a
no,
lot of fun times with Tom, and unfortunately, we haven't done a lot of videos together in a long time. But I'm glad to be getting back to him, and we got a lot. We got to make up for a lot of missed time.
That's right.
I
That's
I
right.
would agree with that completely, Garland. It's really good to see you, my friend. It's been far too long. So that best Christmas present ever. Let's just put it that way. So
Merry Christmas to you both, said the Muslim. Because it's not offensive. It's not offensive to wish people a Merry Christmas for crying
Merry
out.
freaking Christmas. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So we're recording this Friday, the 19th of December. It's 7:35 p.m. right now. Tom, take it away. What's going on in the
Oh,
world?
Jesus. So how about this morning? How about the European Union having walked all the way up to the edge and then finally having to be told, yeah, we really can't steal Russia's money because if we do that, it's kind of bad. And they thought they had this all wrapped up. They thought they were going to make this a thing, and then amazingly at the last moment they had to say no because clearly at a certain point, and it's just funny. This has been that kind of will they won't they for what, 2.5 years now because they. But here's the big one for me, and I know Rich and you and I talked about this earlier in the week or the last time we spoke last week or whatever, that they were planning on absolutely doing this, right? And they were going there because they didn't have any choice because they've already spent the money. Let's not kid ourselves. They've already spent the money either through loan guarantees or whatever. They've already spent the money. They've already pledged it to whomever, and they need the war in order to get the cash flow necessary in order to pay back the debt, pay back the loans, and they don't have it. And they were caught, I think, between the Scylla and Charybdis, to quote Sting, between Trump on the one hand wanting to use the those foreign exchange reserves as a carrot to get Russia to sign a peace deal and then start the integration of the global, them reintegrating them back into the global economy and certainly with the American economy, as well as force the Europeans down from their war stance and end their constant vague threat of, oh, if you don't do what we want geopolitically, then we're going to destroy your capital markets. And that when the European Union went there the other day, no, last week, about a week and a half ago, I'm like, oh, let's see what the next response is. And here we're doing this on that Friday. And what was the necessary response? Bank of Japan raised interest rates to the highest level since 1995, unwinding another layer of the Japanese carry trade.
Well, here's something I think that's
Go ahead, Garland. I'm sorry.
here's something I think that's interesting in a way. I suspect that the Russians have already kind of counted that money off, and maybe there were some people in Moscow saying, "Go ahead and take it. Go ahead and do
Oh
it.
no, they
Do it, do it, do
absolutely.
it," because everybody's going to put all of the money in bricks, put money in us, put money in us and our friends. Please throw us in that briar patch. And I felt
I
all along. What about it? What do you think, Tom?
No, I was going to say, Garland. I think Putin actually said this was the best money we've never spent.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I mean, and to some extent, I think, what was it, John Bolton's book, who said, hey, we got China and Russia and the EU's a big threat to us economically. So there are certain neocon factions that saw the EU, and there are those that wanted to do it in Germany, and they didn't have to. Germany did a good job of it of themselves. But so I think that there's a lot more to it. But let me throw in another angle here. Let me go Joe conspiracy theory here. That's fun. Okay. I'll put it like this. I can remember something I learned. I was an investigator, right? And let's say I found, Maryland, there's a lot of water and boats everywhere, and people are always stealing outboard engines. Some guy leaves his boat on the back. There's a 4 horsepower outboard engine. People run up to the backyard, take it and run, right? Here's what I found. If you found somebody that stole an outboard engine, go to his garage. He didn't steal one. You're going to find a whole bunch of them in his garage. Generally, when people commit a crime, right, unless it's their first crime, that's what they do. They do a whole bunch of it. Here's my point. It's not just the Russian assets that they've stolen. I'm with you, Tom. They've stolen them. They've stolen it. How to get it? It was like they got 340 billion. And next thing you know, yes, the 300 billion. Next, Yes, there's 140. I'm like, how the hell where did it go from 300 billion to 140 billion? Right out, they do this.
Keep slicing off bits and pieces of it,
Yeah,
right?
you've noticed that too, huh? But here's the
Mhm.
other part of it. I thought, you know what? They're probably a little worried because let's just say, for instance, the Russians say, give us our assets, or the Russians say, here's where they were put, giving us back, and they ain't there. But they ain't there. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, other people start. They didn't just steal the Russian assets. They've been dipping into everybody's assets. They've been using and stealing, what have you. And if all of the people who are storing their capital in Euroclear and around Europe say, holy crap, we better start looking, they'll be outed. The whole thing will fall apart. What do you think about that theory, Tom?
I agree with you, Garland. Euroclear was the most vocal about not wanting to do this, right? Because they understood exactly that this was the end of their business. And I think you're completely correct. I mean, again, the Europeans most likely they didn't steal the money outright. It's not like the money's gone. They
Right.
froze the money and then they wrote loans or debts or or gave out loan guarantees or whatever based on that money and based on the future cash flows. The interesting part about it, and this is the part I think everybody should like really start to think about, and it's something that, as a matter of fact, right before we hit record, I was cleaning my inbox from Patreon, and somebody asked me, one of my patrons asked me about, you know, Martin Armstrong's perspective on BlackRock and Ukraine, because Marty had said a couple of years ago, either in a private blog post or one of his public blog posts, he said that BlackRock's investments in Ukraine are all going to go bust up. Well, who was at the last round of talks with Kushner and Witkoff a couple of weeks ago? None other than Larry Fink himself. Now, interestingly enough, when we were in Calgary for Cornerstone last May, I had dinner with Marty, and we were back and forth, and I asked him about BlackRock, and he kind of smirked a little bit, and then he said, they're coming to consult with me on Tuesday. And that was, 9 months ago. Right. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's all I needed to hear. It was good enough. And because I've always said, and I've been saying this for a long time, I'm like, I looked at BlackRock and I said, this is the smallest company ever with the most outsized influence. There are 45 or 50. I could look up the current market shareholder equity of BlackRock. It's like $50-60 billion. At the end of the day, BlackRock is a mid cap. Let's not kid ourselves. But because they control our ETFs, right? Our shares that are all held in their ETFs and their closed-end funds and all this other shit. And yeah, no, they have a very powerful consulting business, and I'm not gonna argue that point. But at the end of the day, if someone wants to take them out, someone can take them out. And they've made bad, they and their subsidiaries like Blackstone and others have made bad residential real estate bets, especially in places like Brooklyn. We all hear about how BlackRock, for example, they all have these, they own all this residential property in the United States, and turning everybody into renters, and they're selling the properties back and forth to each other at inflated prices in order to raise the comps, and then and write loans. It's all crashing down. But a lot of that properties in Brooklyn. That's what people, I think we assume that it's all in like Burbclaves in Iowa. It's not, because when people hear residential real estate, they think Bradenton, right? Florida. They think, Des Moines, Iowa. They think the outskirts, the suburb of Des Moines, Iowa, or whatever. They don't think Brooklyn, but it's Brooklyn. And now you've got Mamdani destroying the city. Okay. And then you've got them, intimately involved in the rebuild of Ukraine after Europe had won the war. And I'm like, yeah, they're staring at an existential event. And there's one other existential event that's over the horizon for BlackRock, which is interesting that it's the exact reverse of what Fink wants, which is the tokenization of assets. Look, if we tokenize all of our portfolios, what the hell do we need ETFs for? And what do we need BlackRock voting our proxy for? We can vote our proxy through the tokenization of our stock portfolios. We don't need them to do it for us. All that stuff will be online. Why the hell do we need BlackRock for? There's a very interesting angle on all of this, that people have to start realizing that, these big, ugly companies that have been turned into these boogeymen, be it big pharma, big ag, big this, big that, like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, they're all standing there wondering how their business model is going to survive the next turn of the geopolitical and technological landscape. And it's a very interesting moment here. So, I throw all that out there, and it's all part of Ukraine. So, because Ukraine is the detonation point, I think, for all of that stuff.
And, it's interesting something you just said, and that is because, like, my sister was a big corporate money, but she was with where did she come out of college? She got recruited. Grant Thornton. That's where she's familiar with Grant Thornton. She was a CPA and ran a lot of companies and stuff. But the reason I bring this, because something you brought up that I didn't think about. I thought like the average schmuck on the street, stealing money, taking money. And then I forgot. You don't steal it. If I got a pound of gold, if I got a gold, I leverage it. I do it to borrow against it. I sell parts of it. I do that. And I sold that pound of gold 10 times over, like 10 pounds of gold. But it's even more valuable. I can't let anybody know I only got a pound of gold because I sold that pound of gold 10 times over. So what you're saying makes sense to me about the Euroclear and the investments in Europe, because what they've done, rather than just take the money and spend it, they've leveraged it. They lent against it. They turned it into asset-backed securities and all kinds of things that nobody even understands what they've owned. And they've sold that same dollar 100 times over again. And if somebody comes in, it would be one thing if they stole $100 and they had to pay back $100. But they took $100 and leveraged against $100 for $10,000. And then now they're in a position where if anybody starts snooping around, they're in deep. They had to freeze that money forever because the day Russia comes, they froze it for good. But they had to, because the day Russia says, here are the documents where I put it, now give it back to me, they're exposed. And this may seem extreme, but it's a lot more extreme than faces the consequences if Russia comes to them with the paperwork and says, give me the money. Their options were to freeze it and face that, or face the reality of what happens here.
And something else you just brought up, Garland, that's very interesting, this to remind everybody, is that they lent these in dollars. They didn't lend these in euros. They can't print dollars. They can print euros. They can't print dollars. They got to go and get dollars, which is why they're all screaming about, well, is the new Federal Reserve chair going to give us dollar swap lines if we get into trouble? I mean, there's no guarantee that Jerome Powell's going to give it to them. They already understand that Powell's like off that train as well. But anybody that is Donald Trump's pick is going to be under threat of cement galoshes from Don Trump Leone if he gives Europe a dollar swap line before they sign off on a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. This is what as they kept moving towards this existential Rubicon moment over these reserves. Trump just kept tightening the friggin' behind the scenes, just Trump tightening the friggin' noose when you start thinking about the next moves down the chain in the process. So it's just fascinating to watch. I never thought they were ever going to steal the money, right? They always tried to get us to do it during the Biden junta. They tried getting Janet Yellen to do it, and Janet and somebody was sitting on Janet Yellen's shoulder going, "You're not doing this.
Yeah, right.
You're not doing this." And that's when even Janet Yellen, the committed commie that she is, finally said, "Okay, yeah, I can't do this." But every time she walked up to it and trial ballooned it, she'd throw it back to Europe. Europe would throw it back to her. And they would keep doing this to try and get the Russians to go offside and do something dumb. And of course, the Russians aren't going to go offside and do something dumb because their whole strategy has been to suck these people in and keep putting assets on the table and fight them in a war of attrition that was both military, political, and economic the entire freaking time. So, which is what I've been saying literally since the day after the war started, or at least the day after the failed peace talks in Istanbul when Boris Johnson walked in and blew everything up. I'm like, oh, the Russians are going to move into attrition mode now. I'm sorry, Rich. Go ahead.
So the the significance that they lent it out in dollars means that the European Union has to earn dollars to make good on those loans or whatever it is they've created. So then how can the European Union earn dollars? Because what they're doing is they're going to borrow the money, or they're going to tax their citizenry or something. 900 billion euros.
Well, so what they're doing now is they're just putting the guarantees against the money they already stole on the backs of the European citizens. That's what they're doing.
Is that the Euro bonds? Is that what they're talking about?
I don't know what they're. I don't know. I didn't read anything about the details of what they did this morning. I just noted that the three guys that you would have expected. I was actually surprised Giorgia Meloni wasn't on the list as well, but Orban, Fico, and Babiš in the Czech Republic all said that's enough, and we're not on the hook for any of this. Right. So you guys are going to do whatever you're going to do. It's all on everybody else. And then Macron comes out right after that and says, "Hey, I think it's time to negotiate peace."
I don't think they can do what they're saying. I don't even think they can do that.
I know.
I don't think they have any economic horsepower. If they were to like sell bonds, who the hell would buy them?
Yeah.
Nobody in their right mind. It's trash.
Garland, I've been watching the bond spreads between the U.S. and Germany, German and Italian. I've been watching all these bond spreads for a long, long time. You and I haven't talked in years since I started going down this rabbit hole or down this part of the analysis, but I've been watching for this moment for years. And I can tell you that, for example, the German, U.S. bond spread, which I've been watching, the 10-year and the 2-year spread are collapsing. We're sitting here today, we're going to close at like 126 or 127 on the German spread versus the German US spread, meaning Germany's debt is trading only 1.28% lower than American debt. What I mean is it used to trade at 2.2. Now it's 1.2. Soon it's going to be higher. And at the same time, you're also watching, and the reason I went after Germany was I said, the America is the safe haven bond trade for the world, and Germany is the safe haven bond trade for Europe. So, we just get a simple sentiment gauge as to where they think the money should go, right? If someone's going to be, putting money into something, you should see, they think that the United States is more politically tenuous than Germany, they're going to preferentially keep their money in German bonds, and Lagarde will have a bid under those, as opposed to Powell, who will not have a bid under American debt. Well, we've been watching it, and clearly what actually has been happening, it's even worse than that. There's not only is there not a bid under the German bund, but Lagarde's been running yield curve control on the German bund in order to, for years, since 2022, since Powell started raising rates. And the canary in that coal mine is the German-Italian spread, where we've watched the spread between Italian and German debt collapse as well. And so the safe haven trade of Europe is moving from Germany to Italy. And who has Giorgia Meloni's back, but none other than Don Trump-Leone. So, and the 100 military bases we have in Italy. And you're watching Giorgia Meloni then turn around and say, I'm sorry, but our 2,452 tons of sovereign gold are the Italian people's gold. And it's not and foreign and shareholders of foreign central banks have no claim over our gold. Now, that's a bold statement to make if Italy doesn't have their gold domiciled in places that are safe. 75% of Italy's gold is domiciled either in Rome or New York. 50% is in Rome, 25% is in New York, and the other 25% is spread across Europe. So the Europeans could steal upwards of 700 tons of gold from the Italians if they decide to leave, the Eurozone, and don't put anything past but those vampires in Brussels to do that. But then again, at the same time, is Trump then going to slap a 35% tariff on them for doing so? What do you think? You know what I mean? So
I think there'd be a price to pay. Yeah,
I think I think the key here, I think what everybody should really wrap their heads around is the fact that Donald Trump is trying to extricate all of the sovereign nations away from the European Union. That's his goal. And then once that's done, and he can then, not just the United States, but also all of the United States allies in Europe, and that would include Italy, and that would include Hungary and the Visegráds. And that naturally creates a buffer zone between Western Europe and Russia, because those Eastern European states can be independent, The Russians don't want to rule those guys. They don't want to rule the Hungarians or the Bulgarians or anybody else. Clearly they don't. So, you then create that natural buffer zone. Then Ukraine is the one left, whatever rump Ukraine is left, they're going to have to come to the table and, start acting like humans again. And if they don't want to act like humans, well, then,
Well, what's interesting about all of that is way back when the Russian leadership said, "Yeah, we'd like to negotiate with the Europe, but we'd like to do it. We don't want to negotiate with the EU. We want to negotiate whatever deal we do with each individual country." Right? The Chinese said, "Yeah, remember what they were saying to the French? Well, you come over here and speak for yourself, and we'll negotiate a deal with you." This damn EU. Everybody's been saying that, and Trump's position. So the three world powers, the three powers that operate in a realm of their own, those three powers, let's face it, they have things that other people don't have, all say to the EU, "Look, this EU crap, we don't like it. Individually, come to us, we can do business with you." Now, here's what's interesting. About 2 weeks ago, I got back. I was in Russia. I was in Belarus and Minsk for like 2 weeks traveling around.
Nice.
And those people living pretty good. I turned my dollars into rubles, man. I was eating at the finest restaurants. I was living on the high on the hog. And here's what's interesting. You remember you used to travel like to South America or something because it was inexpensive and you lived like a king and all that. I went to Russia. The people there are living well. I was talking to someone when I was there and they were like, "Yeah, I went to France recently. I didn't like it." I was like, "Why?" They were like, "Well, the family I was living with, I had to turn on the hot water and they're like, 'Turn it down. It's too expensive,' right?" And they just turning on everything, hot water, the heat, they turn it up. You got to run around in shorts all the time. It's so expensive. The people who have electric heat there. And I was in people's houses. They were telling, "Oh yeah, we're all switching to gas." And I'm like, "Why?" They're like, "Well, the government kind of sells it to us pretty much for their price, so it's 5 times cheaper than electricity now. So we're all switching, right?" They're living good in Russia. I went around, man. They're eating well. The stores are packed. The people are thrilled. I went to Belarus, which is a sister state to Russia, and those people got grins on their face. Their economies are strong. And I tell you something I thought about, and I'm like, wow, for all the crap they're talking about Russia, things are looking pretty good here. I like it here, right? And I got on this train, and we're going out in the middle of nowhere, wherever the hell, out of Moscow. Awesome train, loved it. But we're riding along, and I see heavy industry for miles and miles, big smokestacks. I don't even know what these industries were. I know some were steel mills. So we're riding along, we're seeing heavy industry, and I'm like, and then there's a little town, and obviously everybody at the town works at this industry, and then there's more, and I'm like, now that's kind of what an economy is supposed to look like, isn't it? They got heavy industry, right? They got jobs in the heavy industry. And then I go around, and the people can afford to live. I talked to people about the price for their apartments in Moscow, and they weren't complaining about the rent. They were like, "Oh yeah, they're reasonable, what have you." And let me add this. Another thing I noticed was, like, this one guy that we were hanging out with had like a full-size SUV, like the U.S. Because gas is fairly reasonable, or petrol, whatever they call it, right? And I'm like, the Europeans need to take a note. Last time I went to Europe, I wasn't in no mood to come back. What the hell's going on there? I don't know. But Russia and Belarus, its sister state, I got to tell you, the restaurants are kicking. Everything's nice. The people are happy. I have to say, I was very impressed with where their economy is right now. Anyway.
No, I've heard the same thing from my friend Larry Johnson, who's been there a few times, and others. They all said the same. They've all said the same thing. Tucker Carlson did that look into Moscow before he sat down to interview Putin a couple of years ago. Of course, the neocons are scream Potemkin village and all this nonsense. And it's like, no, look, it's like this is a country on the rise, and Garland, you touched on the important thing here, which is and Alex Craner and I have been talking about this for almost close to 2 years now, which is that we can see the world. It's what's clearly happening is that the world is moving away from a Eurocentric, Atlantic Ocean centric point of view, and now we got to look at a Pacific Ocean point of view, which is, and if you look at the 3 countries that border the Pacific Ocean that matter, actually 4 when you start to include Japan now, it's America, Russia, China. with Japan. And when you start to look at it that way, and that's of course what Trump is talking about when he's talking about potentially a core 5 as opposed to a G7, and still holding out hope that he can schmooze India away from the British. I wish him luck in that endeavor, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But that's I see that clearly as one of the things here, because look, at the end of the day, if you read the national security doctrine, right, the NSCC, and then you read the latest, you can read all of the big major documents that are coming out of the Trump administration, you see the same thing, which is we are going to claim the Western Hemisphere, everybody else get the hell out, and we don't really care what else you do, just stay out of our zone of influence and let's negotiate everything else. And then we're going to fight about the Arctic, but for the end of the day, the Arctic is going to be just another set of sea rats. And and
you might be able to make a deal with the Russians there. You might be able to make some deals with the Russians.
Oh, he's absolutely going to make. They made a deal. I mean, what do you think was honestly? Why do you think they chose Alaska? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly, they want Trump and Putin. Like, I'm watching everything unfold here, and this may be one of the things with the last point about Europe is that Europe is being left at the altar, or being served divorce papers, as our friend Blaine Holt likes to put it, and they don't like it, and so of course, like the jilted wife, they're going to like try and burn everything down on the way out the door, which is why we're seeing the behavior we're seeing out of Mark Carney in Canada. It's why we're seeing the way the blue state governors are all acting. It's why we're seeing everything that we're seeing, and I think the liquidation of places of all the Commonwealth states, Australia, Ireland, the UK, Scotland, Canada. I think they're being liquidated, like as a if we can't have it, you can't have it kind of scenario, and that's a very dangerous position to be in. I don't know. Like, we're not going to get out of this situation without getting our hair mussed. But I just, I need. That's the you and I personally, Garland, haven't talked about this. I talked about this with Rich 100 times. That's the way I see the thing playing out, and that's why 2026 is going to be a very ugly period in the American domestic politics, because they're going to pull out all the freaking stops.
Tom, we'll come to the US domestically, right? I want to stick with Europe, right?
Sure.
For this video. So the European Union are going to put the taxpayers on the hook, the European citizens. And I can't remember the exact figure, but how are they going to do that? Because I listened to, who it was, some YouTube video about the Eurobonds, what it would take, and there may be legal challenges. It would take too long, right? Because the European Union isn't structured for that. It doesn't print euros. Right. So what are they going to do? And then how are they going to fund and pay for their wind-powered tanks? And the UK, they're going to buy nickel. They're going to buy nickel off Russia and silver and everything and copper, and say, look, and iron ore, because we need to build tanks using wind power in order to defeat you. Like,
I'll say this,
darling.
I don't know if Tom will agree with me. You're asking a question that they don't have an answer to. They are in desperation. They don't. You're like, how are they going to do this? And everyone's like, how are they going to do this? They're not economically smart people, right? They don't know how they're going to do it. They're like, we'll steal the money. And they're like, oh, we're going to take the money. We'll take Russia's money. They really had no plan. That fell apart before it even got started, but they were determined out of desperation. They had to try that. That fell apart. Okay, we'll do whatever, Eurobonds, whatever the hell. I think that's going to fall apart for the reasons you're bringing up, that any reasonable person can look at that and poke. You don't have to be knowledgeable about economics to look at that and say, that's got some pretty big holes in it. I don't know how you accomplish that, particularly when you got a bunch of people with 11% approval ratings. I don't know how they do anything, but I think they are in desperation, that they're like, well, we'll do this. That won't work. We'll do that. That won't work. Oh, crap. How about that? I think that's where they are. I think they're in desperation. They don't have a plan, and none of that stuff will work.
Garland, one second, Tom. Watching you, right? Say, okay, the guy's a police officer. You do petty street crook. You're Eurocrat so well.
No, so Garland, I agree with you that they are in that mode, right? And but they still have they still have a lot of assets on the table, on the game board, and
Yeah.
how many people have they moved into various countries? They've got their assets they've got their political assets, they've got all of these things. But at the same time, all of these assets are rapidly depreciating, so they're all in use it or lose it mode, right? So that's why I find it really interesting the way Trump and company are approaching this. This is why, again, I don't want to shift away from this, but it's why Trump is in Venezuela doing what he's doing the way he's doing it, right? What he's doing is he's signaling, we know that he's telling the world, we know Venezuela is the hub of the illicit activities of our intelligence services, and that Maduro really isn't in charge of anything. So you put military assets to up the tempo and up the pressure on intelligence assets. And we all know that when military assets meet intelligence assets get liquidated, because intelligence assets they're not designed to stand up to a military confrontation, meaning, the sniper or the spy who gets outed gets killed, right? He gets liquidated by SEAL Team 6 that comes in and wipes them out. Like, if you're thinking about it at the squad versus an individual level, it's the same thing that's going on in Venezuela, right? And so one of the things and you realize that Venezuela is that hub of like so many different illicit activities of the people that sit above the European politicians that we all know and love, what I would call middle management. And some of them are upper management, but there's the high table above that, to use John Wick speak. And what we're watching is the high table now trying to give orders, and their upper management layer is under attack. So now the cartels are under attack. Von der Leyen is failing. Maduro's middle management, right? But we're watching all of those people like Macron, upper management. Fink was promoted to upper management, and now he's being told, no, Trump, I own you, Larry. You don't work for them anymore. You work for us if you want to get out of this alive, right? So when you watch it from those perspectives, you realize that they have to burn all their assets now, and so Trump and company pushing the economic button, forcing them to put their money on the table and to force this issue over the stolen Russian assets is like a three-way is a detonation of a lot of different angles on their actual power, because they went all in on this. And so because they went all in and they're getting called on the river that they're holding 2-7 offsuit, and they didn't flop their set, or they, you know what I mean, or they didn't turn their set on the river, like, you're fucked, right? They're drawn dead into the hole card. All we have to do is like show it. Now show me your cards. What I mean by this is that when you look at it from that perspective, now is the time when you can actually bankrupt them. Now is the time when you can actually force them to put their money on the table to try and hold together what they have. Their next move, of course, is to activate all of their physical assets in the United States. And that's the part that scares me. But it looks to me like the Trump team understands that as well. And they're getting excellent advice from Mr. Putin, who's had to fight these people for the last 25 years. Because if you watch the way they're fighting and you watch the way they're preempting all the moves, going all the way back to like the LA riots in June, it all looks to me as preempt, accelerate the color revolutionary attempt before they have all their assets in place, and you can fizzle those assets. You can fizzle that color revolution before it ever gets to a terminal. It gets to a critical mass. It's how you invoke Belarus. It's how Lukashenko beat the color revolution attempt after the election, right? And it's how Putin and Lukashenko together move the military in to say, sorry, no matter what happens here, the military is behind Lukashenko. The minute he got on the tank dressed in the fatigues, that thing was over.
Well, one other thing,
something
that I found out, I don't know if you know about this. the color revolution, right? I
Mhm.
don't know if you were familiar with what one of the things that happened there. So there was this guy who was one of the leaders of the color revolution opposition named Roman Protasevich, right? I don't know
Mhm.
if you remember that. And he was flying out and they forced his plane down. You know the story behind that?
I don't, Garland. Go ahead
Okay,
and talk. Go
so
ahead
this is
and
great.
invoke it.
That which is just it's just classic Russian spy stuff. Go online, you can find this. So this guy, I found this out recently in Minsk. So this guy, it was him and his girlfriend. So he was running the main channel behind the main Telegram channel behind the opposition, right? Roman Protasevich, him and his girlfriend, they were the leaders of the opposition. They're pushing Russian. So they're pushing, revolution. Let's fight the powers and get Lukashenko out of here. Okay. So finally, he supposedly is trying to escape. He's on a plane, and Belarus says nope. They force the plane down. They take him and his girlfriend off. They say we're gonna let him go. Right? Guess what? It just came out. He was a Belarusian spy the whole time. Him and his girlfriend. They were running the opposition. You go online and search right now and find it. Protasevich and his girlfriend that were running the main channel were working for Lukashenko. Lukashenko just came out and gave him some awards. That's why they were ahead of it.
Oh my God.
You know that was Russians were behind that because the Russians had come over. That's when the Russians came over, and then Lukashenko said, "Hey, I'm all in Russia now." You know what? The Russians came over and said, "Look, this crap, we can clean this up for you. We're good at this stuff."
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that's how also the move that the European Union made against Belarus there is what actually accelerated Russia and Belarus to sign the Union State Agreement to, use the Russian ruble across the lines and across the border and normalize their military protocols and everything else. So for all intents and purposes, Belarus is not a separate country because it's not but it is. But they and the Russians are no longer at odds anymore because Lukashenko for years would play footsie with the European Union, trying to get money out of them or trying to get something out of them. And, especially when Russia was really weak. But now that Russia has, proven itself and Lukashenko has, got a little bit, the Europeans took their shot against him and they failed. It's like he gets the fear of God put into him a little bit. The Russians have now shown, and so now everybody's like, "Yep, we're all friends now." And this is like Russian mob politics 101.
I think that they said he was a Belarusian spy. I think he was a Russian guy. And now you should have known something was suspicious. Here's a BBC article. Now this is supposed to be the opposition guy trying to overthrow Lukashenko. Here's a BBC article from 2023. A Belarusian opposition activist arrested after his Ryanair flight was forced to land in the capital Minsk has said he's been pardoned. Why would they pardon him? And when I got there, they were like, "Oh yeah, he's pardoned." The BBC reported he was pardoned, like they're going to pardon some guy that's trying to overthrow the country. And now recently they gave him an award because he was.
Yeah, no, it's funny you bring as you're like bringing the story back up. I'm remembering all the other details, the Ryanair plane, the this and that, and everything else. Other than the guy's name, I could not the guy's name I just completely blanked on. But yeah, I remember all those things, but I never put all that stuff together.
Yeah.
That story's fucking great.
He said, "I am incredibly grateful to the country and of course to the president personally for such a decision," he said.
I promise to be good. That's so funny.
Now the came out, finally gave him an award for the work.
Speaking of BBC, takes us to Britain. And in June 2026, the 10-year divorce agreement is over. And you've mentioned, Tom, that what the European Union are going to try and do is try and suck as much money as they can out of the UK. Starmer's going to bring the UK closer to the European Union before that happens.
Yes.
Say more about that, because I don't have a full understanding of it. And
you're correct, Vince. Sorry, you're correct.
I don't
Rich, I'm sorry. I know. Anybody, if you want to be compared to anybody in this world, you get compared to Vince Lombardi. You know that's only the highest.
Vince Lombardi or my son. When people say, "Oh, your son looks like you," oh, he's handsome.
So, no, you bring that up. It's a very important point because clearly part of the liquidation process on the Commonwealth is to ensure that if they are going to be if they are going to be able to finally get Brexit done, then yeah, steal as much as possible, destroy the country as much as possible. And it's also why Keir Starmer refuses to leave office, even though he has no mandate. And the king is clearly incapable of taking control of the situation because he doesn't have enough. He doesn't feel like he has enough, you know, enough
Incapable,
to be able to just
or on
walk in and go,
side.
that's enough of this, because he could.
Yeah,
Right.
incapable, or he's on side, or he's captured, as Ian Burlingham says. We don't know, right? But he could actually,
right, any one of those three things, right?
Yeah.
And so, there has clearly not been an offer given to Charles yet that he's willing to take to abdicate the throne, to hand it to William, so William can then get rid of Parliament and then start. I mean, something on that chain of events, some version of that has not occurred
before
yet.
you go, Garland, do you get this, like how the English British Constitution works, that the king can dissolve Parliament because the king is the guardian, the monarch is the guardian to ensure that Parliament is acting as a representative and not to the prejudice of the people. And it's very, very clear that Keir Starmer is doing nothing other than to the prejudice of the people. So, anyway,
Well, I remember, what was it, in 74, the guy who was the prime minister of Australia, who wasn't going along with the game, and they overthrew him. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, I can't think of his name. And they just went to the Queen. The US didn't like it. They went to the Queen and said, hey, you can do it in England, you can do it in Australia. And I can't remember his name, but they threw him out. But yeah, but
Whitlam, I think it was.
that's what it was. Golf Whitlam. I think that's what it was. Golf Whitlam. Yeah. But I think that I have this feeling too. You know how, when oftentimes when like a company's falling apart and the neoliberals, they're like, okay, this company's falling apart. Let's steal every dime out of it before it ends, right? Let's like, okay, what are we going to do? Can we get some more loans? Can we, you know what I mean? Let's just pick the bones of this thing and put it in debt, and then we'll bankrupt it, right? I kind of have a feeling that's what they're doing with England. I kind of have this feeling like they're looking at England like, this economic situation here is not salvageable. We better steal every dime we can before the thing falls apart. Because I think what comes next in the next iteration, because I think the people on the ground are going to go ape shit. They're going to get angry when they realize what these people have done to them. And I think they know, you're already hearing whispers of it. And that's like, why do we have a monarchy here? Why are we giving these people 500 million a year? Well, those questions are and they know that when things go really bad economically and the guillotines possibly start getting built, when people really get furious, when they realize how bad it's going to get, that they're going to start looking at, we need to dissolve the monarchy. We need to change some serious things. And I think they're going to try to, this is a bit of conspiracy theory. I think they're trying to steal every damn thing they can so they can get out of Dodge. Almost like what was the guy?
Like Zelensky's doing. Zelensky and his crew.
Well, you know what?
Zelensky's doing something.
I did a video 2 years ago, and I called it the Samsonite option. And I said, that's what they're going to ultimately exercise in Ukraine, the Samsonite option. They're going to say, pack our bags and get the hell out of there. Like the guy Ashraf Ghani, right? In Afghanistan. What happened in the end? He's running for a plane, $160 million in cash, money falling out on the tarmac. That's the way it ends with these neoliberals. That's the way it always ends. That's the way it'll end in Kiev, people dangling off the fuselage of a C-130. I think they're starting to look internally and saying maybe France, maybe England, may end like that here. And they're globalists. They don't have they could care less about their particular country. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think they're looking at some of their own countries saying, it may get this bad, so let's steal everything we can before it does. What do you think, Tom?
They're absolutely doing that. That's why they installed Mark Carney in Canada. Mark Carney in Canada was brought in to liquidate the country, to destroy it, to invade it and destroy it, and leave it as a smoking husk.
And head east.
Trump to deal, and then for Donald Trump to deal with the failed state that is Canada. And the same thing is they're doing the same thing in Mexico. They're absolutely doing that. They're trying to do that to the Irish. The Irish are saying no.
Yeah.
And I hope that and I know that Trump wants to save. I think he wants to save the Commonwealth. I do.
Yeah.
I just believe this, but he may not be in a position to be able to help them in the in the long run. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I have no problem with him. I have no problem with him doing it, to be honest with you. But it's going to take a supreme act of will on somebody's part. This is to you, Rich, in your country, that is going to start the ball rolling. We saw some of this already. We've seen it in France, right? The French farmers know how to throw poop all over, government buildings all day, every day. They're so good at it. They should make it an Olympic sport, for Christ's friggin' sake, But then they're doing the same thing to the European Union buildings yesterday. Yep. And if you want to know why today we actually have them saying, okay, that's enough, we're not going to steal the Russian foreign exchange reserves. I mean, the protests in Brussels were real and they were suppressed and they barely made it out on Twitter. And these people are going out and saying, we have the right to threaten American companies and American people with jail time if they come to Europe. Fine. We don't want to I'm telling you, folks, I am not going to Europe anytime soon.
Me neither. Oh, no way in hell.
No way. Not with my freaking mouth. Are you kidding me? I'm not even going to fly. If I wanted to fly to, if I wanted to go and visit Russia or Belarus, or I wanted to go to, that side of the world, I'd have to find a way over there through Dubai or some other mechanism. I'm not going to fly through European airspace. Are you kidding me? Me? I'm going to Belmarsh, guys. Tomorrow.
Tom, that makes absolute sense, given what's happened to George Galloway, British citizen, former MP, who's now living in exile in Moscow. Garland, I want to go back because I think I understand, because Tom's been on many times and has explained this, why he thinks Trump is out to save the Commonwealth. But I'm curious to know why you think that he might be able to do that.
I don't know. I think he would prefer to. I think Trump would prefer. While I think he's had it up to here, as most everybody has with the neoliberals or the liberals or whatever you want to call them, these lunatics that have been completely disgraced. I don't think he wants to give up all connections to the European. You know what I mean? I don't think he wants to just completely divorce himself. I think he wants to have a foothold in there. Number one, and I'll tell you a reason why. Because if you stop them from fighting Russia, these lunatics will fight each other. You know what I mean? Next thing you know, the Poles will be on the German border, and these, you know what I mean? The nobility in Russia, in Europe, always would fight against each other. So he's like, every time there's a world war, there's Germany, there's France, there's Europe, right in the middle of it. Every time a war was these clowns. So if I can keep a foothold in here, at least I can stop them from starting a world war and getting nukes flying all over the place, and then we all got to deal with that. So I think that's what it is, to keep the kids from fighting, the very, very dangerous kids from fighting. And I think that's part of one other thing I'll say. Well, go ahead. I got something else to say about what you're talking about.
I recorded a video just before we did this with Ian Burlingame and Graham Moore. Graham Moore is the head of the English Constitution Society, English Constitution Party. Absolutely fabulous guy, an expert on English constitutional law. And they're both of the opinion that Trump is out to save, in particular, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. And what they said, what I got from them, makes complete sense. And it complements what you said, Garland. So I think that Donald Trump is out to wrestle away sovereignty, restore the United States, get it out from underneath the foot of the city of London. But it's not enough for it to be free of the city of London. It has to destroy the city of London, because otherwise the city of London is going to come back and destroy him and capture the United States again.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly agree with you. And they're threatening people. I mean, you heard Zelensky the other day, well, presidents are born, presidents die. And I was like, that's an interesting thing for you to be saying, Zelensky. Presidents die.
I was going to say that's because what I said on Twitter was he thinks he's issuing a threat when he's actually doing is foreseeing his own, foretelling his own future.
Yeah, I was about to say he better be looking in the mirror when presidents do die. You better be looking in the mirror when you say that, buddy. And I'll say this. So I was in Russia, right? And I was on a lot of TV stations. In fact, what is it called? TV1. That's the biggest station there. So I was at an event and I spoke, and they came to me and they said, we want to do a thing. They did like a half-hour segment just on me on TV1. So I was all over the place. They asked me questions. I went to Minsk. I was on their TV station. Here's what's interesting. I never at any time felt like I had to say anything. I felt like if somebody asked me a question, I could answer it. However I said, I'm sure a lot of the things I said they liked, some of the things they might not have liked. But I never felt like, oh my God, the way they talk, you'll never get out of Russia alive. Putin will get you, blah, blah, blah. I felt like I could say whatever I want. And what's interesting is I was talking to some Russian people about that. And these were very, very powerful people. And they were talking about, look, in any given country, there are rules. People just want to know what the rules are. And they were like, in Russia, when it comes to the special military operation, we know what you can't say and what you shouldn't say. And what we know is this. Why? Because the government views this as existential, and they view you saying things that could stir up stuff inside of the country as a threat to the government. And they're like, and we think that makes sense. So a government can say, you can't say certain things, as if the people can look at it and say, I understand those rules. I understand why those rules are there, and I'm okay with them. Right?
It's fair.
And they're consistent. You know why? Unlike here, where one week you can say, hey, I think this thing came from a lab. The next week you can't say it came from a lab. The next week you'll go throw a tweet. The next day the government says it comes from a lab, but you can't say, well, I think maybe the lab was in Fort Detrick, or maybe it was, you know what I mean? But from 1 month to the next, you can say something, then you can't say something. You don't know what the rules are. You don't know why they are, and they're constantly changing. What they were saying is, look, here, we know the rules. We know them well. We understand them. And most people look at them. And even if we don't agree with them, we'll say, in the context of the security of that nation, this nation, we can understand where the rules are. And it was a really powerful discussion. And I thought, I never thought about that, but it makes sense. And so there, the rules are very, very clear. And you can even say, I know why I agree with it or not. But you go to Europe, I'm scared to death to go to London or Germany, and I don't even know why. I might land and they may bring up a tweet I made in 2002. There you go. Good enough. You're going to jail for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell you,
it is interesting. And, yeah, I mean, you used to work for Sputnik Radio, and
yep.
We used to, and I never felt like I had to, worry about what I was going to say. I used to write for a Russian think tank. I never worried about it. I've been on Russian TV. I've been on RT 24 times. I've been on Sputnik. I don't know how many times. Like never.
Every week. He used to come on every week.
Oh, no, on your radio show. Yeah, we used to do every Friday morning. It was great. We used to do an hour. But I mean, just in even being on RT with Peter Lavelle, I never,
right.
I'd say things that Peter didn't like all the time, and would do it. And what he would always compliment me on my voice. He's like, oh, such a great voice. I'm like, well, yeah, whatever, that's fine. And now I'm going to tell you, and now I'm going to use that voice to give you the hardcore American perspective. And then, honestly, the minute I went like full pro Trump on all of this stuff, the invites started drying up left and right, and that's fine. And look, they have, everybody has their bias, they have their agenda, they have their thing they have to do, and that's the way things are supposed to be. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. At this point in time, they are fighting an existential war against very powerful people that they've been fighting for 300 freaking years, and they have every goddamn right to.
And ain't that all then right now in Russia, I'll tell you this. I'm not going to say they're pro-Trump. But I'll say this, they see Trump in a way for what he really is. They're like, okay, God knows this man has his weaknesses, but there are areas where you would never get this with anybody else but Trump. And there are areas where you just go, oh, geez. Only Trump. Right. But there are also areas where you say you could never, ever, ever see this with anybody else but Trump. So I think they understand Trump, and they scratch their heads sometimes and say, what the hell is this about? But they understand that some things with Trump, there could never be another opportunity for another politician, because he's not a politician. And because he is a business guy and he's looking for business, you know what I mean? You know what I'm getting at, Tom.
I agree with you.
Very clearly.
What was very obvious is that they've learned, like a lot of people in the West refuse to learn, is that Donald Trump does not do statecraft the way it's supposed to be done. He doesn't do it by the rules. Yeah. And who wrote those rules? Oh, the fucking British. And they did it on purpose in order to tell you these are the way we were supposed to talk to each other, and this is polite talk, and this is states, and it drives people crazy when he doesn't do that. And I'm like, that's because he's engaged in negotiations at every point. Every time he opens his mouth, he opens it strategically. He does it on purpose. Whether you like the strategy he's employing, whether you think it's effective or not, we can have that conversation every day. But at this point, if you are still analyzing Donald Trump the way the typical the middle of the road Politico analyzed him back in 2016, you're doing it fucking wrong.
Yeah.
Because this guy should be dead and buried, and he's dead and he's buried all of you. And he's in charge of the United States, and he's moving it forward, and he's surviving it. Maybe there's a method to the madness. And he actually said, I mean, the best thing he ever did was going on Joe Rogan and then explaining his method with a little twinkle in his eye. I watched him talk about the weave and the this and that, and the way he does this stuff. He's like, and you can see he's like fucking with all of us all the time. And he's literally telling you 90% of the words that come out of my mouth at any one moment in time could be taken 16 different ways.
Yeah,
it sounds to me what you're saying, Garland, is that the Russian people, for the most part, understand that, and because they trust Putin and Putin's ability to see through bullshit, and Putin's not going to give the store away. Trump does his thing, and he may not be speaking to them. He may say something that is for domestic consumption that would normally, and then, and everybody gets the fucking vapors because it's the wrong statecraft mode. And then we watch the commentary out, like, oh, he said the wrong goddamn thing. And the Russians are going to get really angry. And the Russians are on. That was funny.
Yeah, that was funny. Tom, we're going to finish up, right? I just want to thank you, because what we've covered in this video is mostly Europe. I'd like to have you back on again, and we can talk about what's happening in the United States and domestically. But one of the, I would just like to make a point about how Trump does politics. And it's a really great point, because the city of London, the British killed McKinley, President McKinley. They killed Abraham Lincoln. They were MI6 probably behind, had something to do with the murder of JFK. And now we have another sovereigntist president who wants to restore the American system of political economy. And he's up against this incredibly powerful, implacable, incredibly rich foe that's got a really successful track record. So he's not going to play the game by their rules.
I can tell you something real quick. I'll make it quick.
Yeah,
very good point.
Ronald Reagan. I had my suspicions with Hinckley, who was close to the Bush family. Let me tell you something. Neither of you have ever heard before in your life. I was in law enforcement in Maryland. Right? There was a park called Sandy Point State Park that was in my area. About a year and a half in that area after Reagan got shot, we got a call. I said, what happened? Well, there's a van from St. Elizabeth Mental Hospital in Washington, D.C., where Hinckley was. He's going to be coming down to Sandy Point State Park on Saturday, and Hinckley will be in it. Okay, we'll have an officer in the area. Every friggin' week, this guy just shot the president. Every week. And I will get on there's a lot of other officers that could tell you the same story. So it isn't just me. This guy just shot the president. He's in a friggin' van. They're coming down to Sandy Point State Park. They're flipping around in the water, snorkeling. They're grilling burgers and chicken on the grill. They get in a van and they go, this is pretty much every week. How in the hell do you shoot the president? I mean, name somebody that shoots the president and is not in jail for life. And a year later, maybe two, but I think 1 year later, this friggin' guy's in a van at the beach looking at the girls flipping burgers every friggin' week. And then he's out. Something suspicious there, pal.
Yes.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
Well, Nimnoga, to put it like in fucking Russian terms. Nimnoga, just a little bit.
Tom Garland, thank you so much, guys. Look forward to having you on again. And I'll have all the links in the description below. Please follow Garland, please follow Tom, and please share and subscribe. We'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.